You're getting dressed in the morning, running late as usual, and you reach down to zip up your jacket. You pull the slider upward, and halfway up, it stops. Dead. You tug harder, jiggle it side to side, pull the fabric taut, and nothing works. The zipper is stuck, wedged in place like it's been welded shut. Frustrated, you yank it back down to try again, and suddenly it glides smoothly, effortlessly, like there was never a problem at all. So you start over, pull it up, and it gets stuck in almost the exact same spot. This cycle repeats 3, 4, maybe 5 times before you finally get it to cooperate or give up and grab a different jacket entirely. It's one of the most universally annoying experiences in daily life, and it raises an obvious question. Why do zippers get stuck going up so much more often than going down? Is it just bad luck, poor manufacturing, or is there something about the design of zippers that makes upward movement inherently more difficult? The answer lies in understanding how zippers actually work, because despite being one of the most common fasteners in the world, most people have never stopped to think about the mechanics happening inside that tiny metal or plastic slider. A zipper consists of 2 fabric tapes, each lined with dozens or hundreds of small interlocking teeth. These teeth are precisely shaped with hooks and hollows that fit together like puzzle pieces. The slider is the small component you pull up and down, and its job is to force those teeth together when moving upward and pull them apart when moving downward. Inside the slider is a wedge-shaped channel that narrows as it goes up. When you pull the slider upward, the 2 rows of teeth are guided into this narrow channel where they're pressed together at a precise angle, causing the hooks on one side to mesh with the hollows on the other. When done correctly, this creates a secure, continuous seal that holds the 2 sides of fabric together. But here's the key. Zipping up requires the slider to actively force the teeth into alignment and interlock them. This is a precise operation. The teeth have to enter the slider at the correct angle, in the correct sequence, and with the correct spacing, or the whole thing jams. Even a tiny misalignment, we're talking fractions of a millimeter, can cause the teeth to wedge against each other instead of interlocking. When this happens, the slider can't move forward because the teeth are now blocking its path. You're essentially trying to force 2 misaligned gears to mesh, and the harder you pull, the tighter they jam. This is why yanking on a stuck zipper usually makes things worse. You're not fixing the alignment problem. You're just applying more force to something that's already mechanically blocked. Going down, on the other hand, is a completely different story. When you pull the slider downward, you're not trying to force anything together. You're pulling things apart. The slider's wedge shape works in reverse, spreading the 2 rows of teeth away from each other and releasing their interlock. This process is far more forgiving. Even if the teeth aren't perfectly aligned, gravity and the spreading motion naturally help them separate. There's no precision required. The teeth want to come apart. They're designed to release easily when pulled in the right direction. This is why you almost never experience a zipper getting stuck while unzipping. The mechanical action is fundamentally simpler and less prone to failure. Another major factor is tension and fabric interference. When you zip something up, especially a jacket or pants, there's often tension pulling the 2 sides of fabric in opposite directions. Your body creates this tension just by existing inside the clothing. This tension tries to pull the zipper teeth apart even as the slider is trying to push them together. If the fabric is tight, or if you're pulling the slider at a slight angle instead of perfectly straight, the teeth can't align properly. They get pulled sideways, or one side gets ahead of the other, and the slider jams. Going down, tension actually helps. If the fabric is tight and pulling the zipper apart, that force assists the slider in separating the teeth. Instead of fighting against you, physics is working in your favor. Fabric getting caught in the slider is another common culprit, and it happens far more often when zipping up. As the slider moves upward, it's pulling fabric from both sides toward the center. If the fabric tape, the lining, or even a thread from your clothing gets caught in the slider's path, it creates a blockage. The slider tries to pull this fabric through the narrow channel along with the teeth, but fabric is much thicker and more flexible than the rigid teeth, so it bunches up and jams everything. When you reverse direction and pull the slider down, that caught fabric usually gets released because the channel is widening instead of narrowing. The fabric can slip out the way it came in. This is why the standard fix for a stuck zipper is to pull it back down slightly and try again. You're giving any caught material a chance to escape. The condition of the zipper itself also plays a role. Over time, zipper teeth can become bent, worn down, or misshapen from repeated use. If even one tooth is slightly out of alignment, it can cause the entire zipper to jam when going up because that single tooth won't mesh properly with its counterpart. Going down, that same damaged tooth might not cause any problem because the teeth are being pulled apart rather than forced together. Similarly, if the slider itself becomes worn or bent, it can lose the precise geometry needed to guide teeth into alignment. A worn slider might still be able to separate teeth going down, but it can no longer reliably interlock them going up. There's also the issue of how we physically interact with zippers. When you zip something up, you're usually pulling upward against gravity and against the weight of the fabric. This means you're applying force at an angle, and if that angle isn't perfectly aligned with the zipper's track, you're introducing lateral stress that can cause misalignment. When you unzip, you're often pulling downward with gravity assisting, which naturally keeps the slider aligned with the track. It's a small difference, but it adds up over hundreds of zipping cycles. Metal zippers versus plastic zippers behave slightly differently in this regard. Metal zippers have rigid teeth that maintain their shape well over time, but they're also less forgiving when misalignment occurs. If metal teeth get even slightly out of position, they can jam hard and sometimes even bend or break under force. Plastic zippers, particularly the coil type where the teeth are actually a continuous spiral of plastic, are more flexible. They can tolerate minor misalignments because the material has some give. However, plastic zippers are more prone to wear and deformation over time, which can eventually make them unreliable in both directions. The trade-off is durability versus forgiveness. Temperature can also affect zipper performance, though this is less obvious. In cold weather, metal zippers can contract slightly, and lubricants or moisture in the zipper can freeze, making the teeth less willing to slide past each other. This increases friction and makes it harder to force the teeth into alignment when zipping up. Plastic zippers can become brittle in extreme cold, making them more likely to jam or break. Going down is less affected because you're not fighting against this additional friction, you're simply pulling apart. Interestingly, the original zipper design was far less reliable than modern versions. Early zippers, developed in the late 1800s and early 1900s, jammed constantly and were considered more trouble than they were worth. It wasn't until Gideon Sunback refined the design in 1913, creating the modern interlocking tooth pattern and the precisely shaped slider, that zippers became practical. Even then, they were expensive and primarily used in boots and tobacco pouches. It took decades of engineering refinement and manufacturing improvements before zippers became cheap and reliable enough for everyday clothing. The fact that modern zippers work as well as they do, considering the precision required and the abuse they endure, is actually a testament to sophisticated engineering. But that precision is also why they are more prone to failure in one direction than the other. The upward motion requires everything to be perfect. The downward motion forgives imperfection. So, what can you do when a zipper gets stuck? The worst thing is to force it. Pulling harder only jams the teeth tighter or risks breaking the slider entirely. The best approach is to gently pull the slider back down to the point where it moves freely, then inspect the area where it jammed. Check for caught fabric, bent teeth, or visible misalignment. Sometimes just smoothing out the fabric tape or adjusting how the garment sits on your body is enough to eliminate the tension causing the problem. If the zipper is old or the teeth are damaged, a bit of lubricant like graphite from a pencil, candle wax, or specialized zipper lubricant can help the teeth slide past each other more easily. But if the slider itself is bent or worn out, no amount of lubricant will fix the underlying mechanical problem. At that point, you either need to replace the slider or accept that the zipper's best days are behind it. The truth is, zippers get stuck going up more than going down because of fundamental physics and mechanical design. Zipping up is an active process that requires precision, alignment, and force. You're pushing two rows of rigid teeth together in a specific sequence, and any deviation from perfect conditions causes failure. Zipping down is a passive process. You're releasing an interlock that wants to come apart anyway, and even imperfect conditions usually aren't enough to stop it. Add in tension from fabric, the possibility of caught material, wear and tear on the components, and the physical challenges of pulling upward versus downward, and it's actually surprising that zippers work as reliably as they do. The next time you're fighting with a stubborn zipper, remember that you're not just battling a piece of clothing. You're dealing with a precision mechanical system that's been optimized over a century of engineering, and sometimes, despite all that sophistication, a single misaligned tooth is all it takes to bring the whole thing to a halt. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution.